Hello guys, welcome back to our anime explainer. Guys, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. Today is explanation of Dragon Prince Yuan Season 2 episode number 17 based on novel. So let's start. This scene was rather provoking to the eyes. Waves of noise spread inside and outside the Saint Remains domain. Ju Yuan's techniques are not shabby at all. Both of them likely have grade 5 Genesis Chi, else it would be very difficult for their Genesis Chi to take on such forms. I thought that Ju Yuan would lose rather quickly, but from the looks of it, he can still last for some time. I'm of the opposite opinion, just consider how strong Wu Huang is. No matter what, Ju Yuan is one cultivation level lower. If he was also at the Alpha Origin stage, Wu Huang may not be able to beat him, unfortunately. In the sky outside the Saint Remains domain, the 6 envoys and the numerous representatives watched the scenes within the mirror in rapt attention. When the giant dark gold python swallowed the golden 3-legged crow, Zhao Pan's eyes narrowed slightly, but an icy smile appeared from the corners of his lips as he said, Ju Yuan's appetite is quite large. Isn't he afraid of eating beyond his means? Someone of his caliber was naturally able to tell that both individuals possessed grade 5 Genesis Chi. Such Genesis Chi was already pretty extraordinary. However, although both parties were the same grade 5, Ju Yuan was only at the Heaven Gate stage, while Wu Huang was an Alpha Origin expert. The difference in Genesis Chi cultivation between them was not small at all. Ju Yuan may have previously been able to take advantage of others with his grade 5 Genesis Chi, but that advantage was no longer present against Wu Huang. Upon hearing Zhao Pan's remarks, the other envoys gave a slight nod. They were naturally also able to tell that Ju Yuan would not have any advantage in a clash such as this. Mu Wuji did not comment this time. He merely continued to stare at the giant dark gold python that had swallowed the golden 3-legged crow as he frowned slightly. Under their attention, the python suddenly hissed as scarlet red flames began to unfurl inside its body. You're too arrogant, Ju Yuan. You may have grade 5 Genesis Chi, but I have one too. Your Genesis Chi is powerful and plentiful, but mine is even more so. And now, you dare to forcibly swallow my Genesis Chi. That's just seeking death. Wu Huang coldly stared at Ju Yuan. Soon after, a mocking smile raised from the corners of his lips as he made a seal with one hand. Cackle asterisk. Scarlet red flames abruptly burst out from the giant dark gold python's body. The flames burned, turning python into nothingness. From within the flames, the 3-legged crow formed once again. Although it was now much smaller, it still gave off an astonishing presence asterisk. Be burnt to ashes by my golden crow's sky-burning chi. With a cry from Wu Huang, the golden 3-legged crow descended, heading straight for Ju Yuan. This scene instantly caused countless gasps both inside and outside the Saint Remains domain. Boiling heat filled the sky as it surged over. Ju Yuan raised his head, but there was not even the slightest shred of fear on his handsome face as he gazed at the rapidly growing 3-legged crow. Ju Yuan spoke in a calm voice, if it's just Genesis Chi, mine is indeed weaker than yours. However, anything that has been swallowed by my python will be able to escape so easily. He slowly extended a hand, aiming it at the incoming golden 3-legged crow. Wu Huang's pupils abruptly shrank at this moment. Because he had seen a strange lines of blood suddenly appear on the golden 3-legged crow. The lines squirmed and twisted as they gave off an extremely eerie aura. Light emerged from the bloody lines as the ferociously sweeping down golden 3-legged crow seemed to let loose a miserable cry, the burning flames on its body rapidly dimming at an alarming speed. Bang! The crow exploded when it was still dozens of feet from Ju Yuan, transforming into a rain of fire. Dark gold Genesis Chi transformed into a cloud above Ju Yuan's head, blocking every last drop of fire. Several envoys involuntarily cried out in shock outside the Saint Remains domain. The sneer on Zhao Pan's lips turned a little rigid, his expression now a little ugly. He clearly never expected that Wu Huang's advantage would be so easily dispelled by Ju Yuan. Mu Wuji breathed a sigh of relief. So the reason why Ju Yuan had dared to engage in a direct clash of Genesis Chi was because he did have something up his sleeve. Mu Wuji mumbled in his heart, this brat's Genesis Chi seems to contain an extremely tyrannical and sinister presence. Wu Huang's golden 3-legged crow had clearly been contaminated by this sinister presence earlier when it was inside the python's body, causing it to swiftly fall apart in the end. Mu Wuji chuckled. Zhu Yuan had originally been unable to match Wu Huang in Genesis Qi due to the difference in their cultivation levels. But if Zhu Yuan had the aid of that strange and tyrannical presence, Wu Huang may not be able to do anything against the former in this aspect. What did you do? Wu Huang's chilling gaze glared at Zhu Yuan, clearly having also sensed that strange tyrannical presence. Zhu Yuan slowly extended his hand, his palm facing Wu Huang. A lump of blood red slowly wiggled at the center of his palm, as it gave off heart-shaking resentment. Have you forgotten? This is the present your father left for me. Zhu Yuan's indifferent voice sounded. Wu Huang's pupils shrank. It's the dragon's resentment poison. He naturally knew that the sacred dragon blessing had given birth to resentment when his father stole it from Zhu Yuan many years ago. His father had sealed this resentment in Zhu Yuan's body, resulting in the formation of the dragon's resentment poison that continuously devoured his essence blood, crippling him completely. But from the looks of it, not only had Zhu Yuan survived the dragon's resentment poison, he had even made it a strong ally. Due to the tyrannical and strange nature of the poison, even someone like Wu Huang did not dare to let it enter his body. The fact was that he had already felt the poison's domineering nature when he met Xiao Tianxian and Ji Yuling. However, the dragon's resentment poison in their bodies had been too thin, leading Wu Huang to disregard it. Only now that he personally witnessed it today did he truly understand its terror. Wu Huang sinisterly said, "You are really like a cockroach, to think that even that did not kill you." Zhu Yuan indifferently retorted, "How can I possibly die before I return each and every one of these gifts to your Wu clan? Is that so?" Wu Huang's eyes were eerily cold as the golden crow spear suddenly shot out of his hand, transforming into a flash of scarlet light. With unmatched berserk power, it rocketed towards Zhu Yuan like a bolt of lightning. The heavenly Yuan brush in Zhu Yuan's hand shuddered as it floated into the air. A vicious kick was sent towards the back of the brush, transforming it into a streak of light as it shot forth. Clang! Spear and brush smashed in mid-air as an earth-shaking clang resounded. Both weapons were flung backwards, stabbing into the white jade plaza as cracks extended on the ground around them. The tip of Wu Huang's feet landed on the head of the spear, his eyes filled with murder as he stared at Zhu Yuan's figure. Wu Huang's hands swiftly formed a seal as scarlet-red Genesis Qi surged over. He deeply inhaled, before abruptly blowing. Cackle *. Scarlet-red Genesis Qi spouted out in an arc, swirling around in front of him as it transformed into a glowing head-sized scarlet-red bead. The silhouette of a golden crow could be faintly seen within it as berserk Genesis Qi ripples pulsed. Zhu Yuan, you may not have died back then, but I feel it is time for you to die now. Little Heaven Genesis Technique, Golden Crow Detonation Bead. Wu Huang foot slammed into the spear with a stern shout, causing the golden crow spear to bend at an extreme angle. A sudden jerk later, Wu Huang's body instantly appeared some distance in front of Zhu Yuan. Killing intent violently surged out from Wu Huang's eyes as the spinning scarlet-red bead in his hand was viciously swung downwards at Zhu Yuan. The ground below his feet instantly shattered at this moment. Extreme heat filled the air. Zhu Yuan gazed upon the figure that had appeared slightly above him, as a ruthless look suddenly surged in his eyes. Dog-reared Wu clan, you cruelly bullied me back when I was a baby. Today, I will first take this mixed blood mutter's interest. Zhu Yuan's handsome face seemed to twist hideously into savagery. All the killing that he had suppressed in his heart for so many years came blasting out at this moment. In response to Wu Huang's ferocious attack, Zhu Yuan neither avoided nor dodged, his sleeve suddenly blasting apart as his fingers violently dug into the wind lightning ball that had appeared on his palm. Mad ruthlessness in his eyes, he sent his hand swatting towards Wu Huang. Little Heaven Genesis Technique, Great Wind and Thunder. Life for a life. Wind and thunder churned violently, berserk undulations madly pulsing from the lightning ball as it was sent slapping towards Wu Huang. Zhu Yuan did not bother with any defensive measures, choosing instead the most terrible and cruel price of meeting the attack head-on with violence. The numerous gazes inside and outside of the Saint Remains domain were stunned. Zhu Yuan, is he crazy? What a fierce guy, that's practically akin to throwing away your life. His intent on making sure that the both of them go down. Lunatic. Everyone dripped with cold sweat due to Zhu Yuan's madness and ferocity. Such a risky life-for-life tactic just was too vicious, leaving no way out for both oneself and the opponent. Boom. Under the attention of stunned gaze after gaze, Wu Huang's golden crow detonation bead slammed into Zhu Yuan's body, while the great wind and thunder in his hand mercilessly struck the former's body. A deafening, earth-shaking noise exploded, followed by the eruption of a devastating Genesis Chi shockwave. Rumble. The white jade floor beneath their feet was completely shattered, the shockwave wreaking havoc in the area, leaving the ground a giant mess. Scarlet light swallowed Zhu Yuan's entire body like fire. Opposite him, Wu Huang's body was also engulfed by destructive, devastating lightning. Bang! Two figures flew backwards as if struck by a heavy blow, leaving a long smear on the ground as dust filled the air. Everyone's gazes were closely watching, not even daring to breathe too loudly. They did not know who would end up worse off in such a high-risk exchange. The dust gradually dissipated. Wu Huang's figure was the first to appear. When the crowd's eyes fell upon his figure, low gasps of surprise rang out. Scarlet-red light swirled around Wu Huang's body, forming a scarlet-red battle armor that covered his entire body. The chest portion of the armor was scorched black, cracked, broken and mostly in extremely bad shape, evidently the handiwork of the great wind and thunder technique. That's a defensive Genesis technique. The sight of the Genesis Chi battle armor caused waves of noise to erupt both in and out of the Saint Remains domain. No one had expected that Wu Huang would even have a defensive Genesis technique in his arsenal. Moreover, it looked pretty high class. Zhao Pan smiled when he saw this. Soon after, he remarked with mockery in his voice, Zhu Yuan must have lost his mind. To think that he intended to risk his life to take Wu Huang's. It may seem like a ruthless tactic, but it is in actuality mere foolishness. The other envoys secretly nodded. At the very least, it looked like Zhu Yuan's tactic had not done much damage to Wu Huang, while the latter's golden crow detonation bead had squarely hit Zhu Yuan's body. It was likely that even an ordinary Alpha Origins stage would be instantly killed by such a blow. Mu Wuji was expressionless, paying no heed to Zhao Pan's words. The former merely stared at the spot that Zhu Yuan had been previously, where the dust was also gradually receding. On the white jade plaza, Wu Huang's eyes darkly stared at the dust nearby as he sneered, "A life for a life. I admit that I underestimated your resolution and ruthlessness. But Zhu Yuan, you and I have different destinies, so I'm afraid that you will not succeed so easily. After being struck by my golden crow detonation bead, I believe you won't be feeling so good now, right?" The dust receded as footsteps slowly sounded. Faint golden light appeared, as a calm voice echoed from the dust, "Pretty good name, but it's a pity that your attack doesn't live up to its namesake." Zhu Yuan walked out from the dust, appearing within everyone's sights. Countless gazes immediately focused. Golden light flickered on Zhu Yuan's body, the golden scales akin to a set of scale armor. A large portion of the golden scales on his chest area had been shattered and destroyed, but was swiftly recovering under the glow of the golden light. The Genesis Chi around Zhu Yuan was still robust, a sign that he had not sustained any serious injuries. "Wu Huang, did you really believe that you're the only one with cards up your sleeve? If I did not take any precautions, why would I try such a risky tactic?" Zhu Yuan stared at Wu Huang and icily chuckled. "Because from what I can see, my life is definitely worth much more than yours." Zhu Yuan's crazed ruthlessness from earlier may seem like he was hell-bent on risking his life to take Wu Huang's, but the truth was that he had a fallback plan. With the protection of the magical python scales, Zhu Yuan boasted an extremely strong defense. The only thing that had exceeded his expectations was that Wu Huang also had a defensive Genesis technique. Upon seeing that Zhu Yuan had walked out unharmed, numerous yelps of surprise erupted both outside and inside the Saint Remains domain. How could they not understand by now that Zhu Yuan had done it on purpose? If not for that fact that Wu Huang also had a defensive Genesis technique, he would have been dealt a serious blow by Zhu Yuan. Mu Wuji laughed, rubbing his hands together as he praised, not bad at all. He has both courage and brains." The corners of Zhao Pan's mouth twitched as he darkly stared at Zhu Yuan's figure in the mirror. "Humph, he may have courage and brains, but he may soon no longer have his life." The other envoys also looked towards the mirror with interest. They originally believed that the fight would be easily dominated by Wu Huang. No one had expected the situation to develop in such a manner. Wu Huang, who originally possessed the absolute advantage, was being dragged into a deadlock by Zhu Yuan. It seems that this battle was becoming more and more meaningful. Wu Huang's expression darkened as he stared at the golden scale armor on Zhu Yuan. He too never expected the once and like existence in his eyes to become such a huge problem. No matter how you jump and hop, you will definitely die today. Killing intent violently surged in Wu Huang's eyes. Boom. His foot stomped into the ground, a berserk aura spreading from his body as he shot straight towards Zhu Yuan. Fists transformed into flashes of scarlet light, filling the sky as they descended upon the latter. The genesis chi of Wu Huang's attacks was vigorous and robust. One must know that he too was fierce individual capable of battling those above his cultivation level. Although he had recently advanced to the Alpha Origin stage, if one were to compare how much genesis chi he had, it was likely that some second layer, and even third layer Alpha Origin experts would not be his match. Now that he was going full throttle, the terror of his power was naturally revealed. Zhu Yuan's gaze was ice cold. He took in a deep breath as he watched the madly attacking Wu Huang approach, but did not retreat as the gold magical python's scales released a dazzling radiance. His strength soared through the amplification of the magical python scales. I do want to see just how you'll kill me. Zhu Yuan sneered. The floor beneath his feet shattered once again as he shot forward, colliding head-on with Wu Huang. Fists and kicks left numerous after images as they rapidly flew like lightning, the resultant shockwaves tearing apart the ground around them. Both parties were overflowing with murder, each strike aimed to kill. One relied on the protection of his battle armor, while the other relied on his golden scales. Hence, it was an exchange of attacks, each punch slamming into the other's body, making the onlookers' hearts jump. If it was anyone else, they would have been beaten to death long ago. These two, however, were exceptionally sturdy and stubborn, only growing increasingly ferocious as time passed. In the short span of a few minutes, the two had fought over 100 rounds. Everyone both inside and outside the Saint Remains domain watched the bitter, inhuman fight with bated breaths. However, as time passed, Mu Wuji's brows suddenly furrowed slightly. He could faintly feel a strange undulation spreading from Wu Huang's genesis chi. His gaze swept towards Zhao Pan from the corner of his eye, only to discover a strange smile appearing from the corners of the latter's lips. He closely inspected Wu Huang, and suddenly found that scarlet-red genesis chi had appeared above his head at some unknown time, seemingly transforming into scarlet-red clouds. The scorching scarlet clouds seemed to rouse the surrounding genesis chi, causing it to rapidly surge over. Drawing in the surrounding genesis chi, Mu Wuji's pupils suddenly shrank as he involuntarily cried out in his heart, "Not good, Wu Huang has mastered a heaven genesis technique." Only a word separated the little heaven and heaven, but the difference between them was as immense as the sky. Even Mu Wuji had never expected Wu Huang to possess a heaven genesis technique. One must know that such a technique was an extremely rare existence in a continent like this. Evidently, after being pushed so far by Zhu Yuan, Wu Huang was beginning to reveal his true power, the trump cards that invoked fear and terror finally exposed. On the white jade plaza, Zhu Yuan and Wu Huang's fist and leg slammed into each other, a blast of genesis chi exploding from the epicenter. The ground around them was completely shattered, while Zhu Yuan and Wu Huang's figures were sent flying backwards. Zhu Yuan forcibly steadied his body with a stomp. He frowned slightly as he lowered his head, seeing the mostly broken golden scale armor on his body from which traces blood oozed out. From this, one could see just how intense the battle between him and Wu Huang had been. Thank God for the magical python scales protection, or I would have really suffered in such a clash. Zhu Yuan remarked inside. Wu Huang had the strength of the Alpha Origin after all, making the quality of his physical body greater than Zhu Yuan's own. Without the magical python scales, Zhu Yuan really would not dare to engage in such a melee. While such thoughts flashed past in his mind, Zhu Yuan suddenly sensed something and abruptly lifted his head, looking towards the area above Wu Huang. Scarlet clouds could be seen in the air, giving off extremely alarming genesis chi undulations that made the temperature of the entire plaza rise. What astonishing genesis chi undulations! Zhu Yuan's expression changed as his eyes turned grave. To think that Wu Huang had actually made use of the time they were locked in battle to secretly bring out his genesis chi and activate an extremely powerful genesis technique. This truly was an applaudable feat. Wu Huang stood in the air atop his genesis chi, his eyes cold as he looked down upon Zhu Yuan, and said in an indifferent voice, "This low-grade heaven genesis technique of mine was originally prepared for Yiming or Li Chunjun. I never imagined that it would ultimately be used on you." Low-grade heaven genesis technique. Zhu Yuan's pupils shrank slightly. Wu Huang had mastered a heaven genesis technique. Although Zhu Yuan had never learnt one before, he clearly understood the might it possessed. A Genesis technique of that level could slay even those above one's cultivation level. How troublesome. Zhu Yuan sighed softly. Wu Huang was indeed the most difficult amongst all the opponents he had ever encountered. Numerous gazes both in and out of the Saint Remains domain were tinged with shock and amazement, as they gazed upon the scarlet cloud in the sky. Wu Huang truly is unfathomable. He has even mastered a Heaven Genesis technique. Most importantly, he has even managed to activate it, a feat that ordinary Alpha Origin experts may not be able to achieve. Looks like the battle is going to end soon. Zhu Yuan cannot possibly survive that. Most of their remarks were filled with regret, evidently pitying Zhu Yuan, but this was the cruel reality that nothing could be done about. The dark horse Zhu Yuan had already surprised and amazed everyone by reaching this stage, but the opponent he was pitted against this time was just far too strong. Zhu Yuan, if you're feeling regretful now, destroy your qi dwelling and I will spare your life. Wu Huang grinned a little as he stared at Zhu Yuan, as if everything was already in the palm of his hand. Zhu Yuan also smiled as he calmly replied, "Useless trash, you had the lead for so many years, and yet you were still pushed so far by me. Wu Huang, you're not as formidable as I had expected." Wu Huang's gaze turned eerily chilling as he icily said, "Since you want to die, I will grant your wish. Don't worry though, I will hang your corpse from my banner when I destroy the great Zhu Empire." His face twisted into cruelness, as his hands came together, and Genesis Chi erupted. Heaven Genesis technique, Scarlet Heaven Gravel Explosion. Boom. The scarlet cloud above Wu Huang shuddered violently. All of a sudden, countless scarlet red gravel rained down from the sky, an explosive power contained within every piece. An area within 1,000 feet was covered in the shadows of the falling gravel. Scarlet Heaven Gravel Explosion. Mu Wuji's expression immediately changed when he saw this. His frosty gaze looked towards Zhao Pan as he questioned, "Why do I recall that this Heaven Genesis technique belongs to Sacred Palace?" Zhao Pan smiled slightly as he replied, "Your memory must be failing you. Sacred Palace has countless Genesis technique, some of which may naturally be similar to this one." Mu Wuji was livid. Zhao Pan was completely shameless. As an envoy, he had secretly interfered and showed favoritism, even giving a Heaven Genesis technique to Wu Huang. Crash. Innumerable scarlet rocks swept down from the sky, practically transforming the area into a death zone. Anyone who stepped in would undoubtedly be killed. Everyone inwardly shook their heads. Zhu Yuan was really in danger this time. Under those countless pitying gazes, Zhu Yuan's expression was exceptionally grim, however, he did not show any panic. With a deep breath, he said, "Wu Huang, did you think that you were the only one secretly preparing something earlier?" Wu Huang's eyes narrowed slightly. Zhu Yuan icily snorted. With a sudden wave his sleeve, a gush of force swept out, sweeping away all the rocks on the ground. Everyone immediately saw several scrolls sticking out from the ground around Zhu Yuan. Ripples spread from each scroll. The sight of these scrolls caused the crowd to cry out, "Those are Genesis rune scrolls. What is Zhu Yuan up to?" "From what I can see, those Genesis rune scrolls are at most grade 3 Genesis runes. It's not possible for them to stop the Scarlet Heaven Gravel Explosion." Wu Huang let out an icy chuckle. "Trying to scare me off? Those can't save you." He had also realized that the Genesis rune scrolls were only grade 3, and thus nothing to be feared. Zhu Yuan ignored the former, and instead reached out a hand and made a slight grabbing motion. The heavenly Yuan brush stuck in the ground some distance away immediately shot towards him as it swiftly shrank, turning back into its culture form when it reached his hand. Brush now in hand, Zhu Yuan began to draw in the air, creating stroke after stroke. In the end, the strokes gradually came together to form a Genesis rune. Shatter. With a stomp of his food, the Genesis rune scrolls around him instantly burst apart. Light blossomed and began interweaving, taking the shape of numerous tortoise shells. Each ray of light seemed to overlap with another, an exceedingly mystical sight. At this moment, the complex Genesis Chi in front of Zhu Yuan released a dazzling radiance. Light transformed into strings, linking the tortoise shell like runes together. In a short span of a few breaths, a tortoise shell dome of light, dozens of feet in diameter, had been created around Zhu Yuan, protecting him. There was originally nothing to fear from these grade 3 Genesis rune scrolls, but after connecting to each other, they seemed to receive a tremendous boost. Genesis Chi concentrated into thick, sturdy bonds, like an ancient tortoise shell. This is The sight of this caused gasps of amazement to erupt both in and out of the Saint Remains domain. Mu Wuji likewise watched in surprise, as one of the envoys, who was more proficient in Genesis runes, involuntarily cried out, "He has constructed a Genesis rune boundary. What amazing Genesis rune talent! So it's a Genesis rune boundary." A strange shine was revealed in Mu Wuji's eyes. One must know that it was extremely complicated to construct a Genesis rune boundary, because numerous Genesis runes were needed as building blocks. In addition, they needed perfectly connected, and not even the smallest mistake could be tolerated. This required extremely fine control over one's spirit power and senses. Even grade 4 Genesis rune masters may not be able to construct a Genesis rune boundary like this. And yet, Zhu Yuan had succeeded in constructing it while he was locked in combat. Although its foundations were made from grade 3 Genesis runes, its defensive ability is extremely outstanding, and may even be enough to withstand Wu Huang's killing blow. Mu Wuji could not help but laugh. I've indeed underestimated this kid. Even he had not been too optimistic about Zhu Yuan's odds this time, but who could have expected that the latter would be amply prepared? Under countless gazes filled with amazement, Zhu Yuan stood within the Genesis rune boundary. He lifted his head to look at the sky full of scarlet gravel, as the Genesis rune brush in his hand pointed in the air. Resplendent rays of light instantly exploded from the entire Genesis rune boundary, bestowing the ancient tortoise shell indestructibility. Wu Huang, let my heavenly tortoise boundary have a taste of how powerful your heaven Genesis technique is. The tortoise shell-like dome glowed brightly as mystical runes appeared on it, giving it an indestructible feeling. Zhu Yuan stood within it as he watched the scarlet gravel sweep down from the sky. Under countless nervous watching gazes, the scarlet gravel ruthlessly smashed into the tortoise shell Genesis rune boundary. An unceasing chain of explosions immediately began. Every scarlet rock contained volatile explosive power, and the accumulation of so many was definitely extremely terrifying. Even a mountain would be destroyed by their combined force. Scarlet shockwaves that could be seen with the naked eye unfurled as the Genesis rune boundary violently rippled. Every gaze both outside and inside the Saint Remains domain were tightly glued to the scenes in the mirror. Everyone clearly wanted to know if Zhu Yuan's Genesis rune boundary would be able to withstand such a frightening attack. If it failed, it would likely be the end of the battle. Every eye in the place did not dare to even blink. Inside the Genesis rune boundary, Zhu Yuan stared at the wildly rippling Genesis rune boundary. He could feel just how powerful the bombardment was. If he was exposed, things would indeed become very difficult. A heaven Genesis technique sure is terrifying, mumbled Zhu Yuan. Even a low-grade heaven Genesis technique was already able to rouse the surrounding Genesis chi, creating a frightening attack. Such power was far from anything a black Genesis technique could achieve. His gaze peered into the distance where Wu Huang was standing on scarlet-red Genesis chi in the air. The latter's face was currently sinisterly dark, a gaze that could swallow a man whole locked onto Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan, since you're living in such misery, you should not so desperately delay the inevitable. Wu Huang's chilling voice sounded. Ads by Pub Future. His hand seal changed, immediately causing the scarlet cloud in the sky to shake as more and more scarlet gravel rained down, covering the entire sky as they plunged towards the violently rippling Genesis rune boundary. The increasingly ferocious attacks caused the entire tortoise shell-like Genesis rune boundary to begin shaking wildly. That Genesis rune boundary is about to reach its limit. This scene immediately fell into the eyes of numerous people, resulting in a series of pitying sighs. What a pity, Zhu Yuan was really amazing. Yeah, with the cultivation of the Heaven Gate stage, he forced even someone like Wu Huang to use a Heaven Genesis technique. Even if he loses, his name will surely shake the Kangman continent. Agreed. If he also had Alpha Origin stage cultivation, it would be difficult to say who would win this battle. Rumble. Amidst the numerous voices, the Genesis rune boundary shaking grew more and more violent, the tortoise shell-like boundary weakening layer by layer under the bombardment of countless scarlet gravel. Zhu Yuan, you will die today. The murder in Wu Huang's eyes grew thicker and thicker as he watched the weakening Genesis rune boundary. In the next instant, he suddenly put his hands together and shouted, "Scarlet gravel punch." The scarlet gravel in the sky began to gather at this moment, forming a several dozen feet large scarlet red fist. The giant fist was the sum of innumerable scarlet gravel, wild and berserk undulations pulsing from it. Die. Wu Huang laughed savagely as his palm swung downwards. The giant scarlet gravel fist descended at an indescribably fast speed. Even Zhu Yuan was only able to see a blur fly past as a series of muffled explosions rang out in the sky. In a mere instant, the scarlet fist had already appeared above the Genesis rune boundary, slamming down a split second later. The Genesis rune boundary seemed to freeze at the moment of impact. Almost immediately after, ripples crazily pulsed from the point of contact. A faint sound was heard from the Genesis runes on the ground, cracks appearing on them. Cracks similarly began to emerge on the Genesis rune boundary. It was clearly on the verge of shattering. Countless onlookers shook their heads inside. As expected, Zhu Yuan's Genesis rune boundary was still a little lacking. Looks like it's not enough. Zhu Yuan frowned slightly. The central pillar of his Genesis rune boundary were Grade 3 Genesis runes. If he could replace them with Grade 4, it may be enough to withstand the attacks. The giant scarlet gravel fist trembled as the Genesis rune boundary finally reached its limit and burst apart with a boom. Having blasted apart the Genesis rune boundary, the scarlet fist continued to descend, heading straight for Zhu Yuan. Zhu Yuan's legs bent, about to use Dragon Step to dodge. The attack was too powerful, and it was impossible for him to receive it head-on given his current strength. However, the moment Zhu Yuan was about to dodge, he suddenly felt a tremble from between his brows as a faint ancient rune appeared. The Saint Rune from the Golden Pool. Zhu Yuan's heart shook. He had tried so hard to get a reaction from the Saint Rune previously, but his efforts bore no fruit. It was surprising for it to suddenly appear at this critical juncture. Lines suddenly extended from the rune, ultimately piercing Zhu Yuan's pupils. A slight prickling pain was felt from his eyes. Unbeknownst to him, ancient patterns began to fill Zhu Yuan's pupils. Before he could panic, he suddenly realized that world before him seemed to be different. The quick as thunder giant scarlet gravel fist seemed to have slowed substantially. Moreover, several dots of light had appeared in the giant fist. These light dots were scattered all over, making it difficult to make any sense of them. However, Zhu Yuan could feel that the area in the vicinity of these light dots were extremely unstable, the Genesis Chi there somewhat in chaos. These are... Zhu Yuan pupils suddenly tightened. Weak points. The light dots were definitely the most vulnerable areas of the giant scarlet gravel fist. In other words, weak points. But this realization also confused Zhu Yuan. These vulnerabilities were concealed by the scarlet gravel, making them almost impossible to detect. Yet, they were now as bright as lamps in his eyes. Is this the ability of the Saint Rune? Zhu Yuan was struck by a flash of understanding. The Saint Rune could allow him to see the many vulnerabilities in Genesis techniques. Zhu Yuan's heart was akin to a raging sea, because he knew just how frightening this ability was. Vulnerabilities existed in any Genesis technique. If he could find these vulnerabilities, it would be akin to achieving a huge effect with little effort, paying the smallest possible price to destroy an opponent's Genesis Chi. The figure that was about to retreat paused slightly. If so, perhaps I no longer need to avoid. He raised his head, looking at the rapidly descending giant scarlet gravel fist, as his eyes narrowed slightly. His legs bent again, swiftly shooting forward a split second later. 5 fingers clenched tightly into a fist, as the golden magical python scales emerged. Dark gold Genesis Chi whizzed out, shaking the surrounding air. He isn't going to dodge. Horrified yelps exploded when this scene fell into the eyes of the many onlookers. Everyone was both shaken and stunned by Zhu Yuan's foolish actions. Mu Wuji's expression also changed slightly, while a malicious smile was revealed on Zhao Pan's face. Wu Huang looked down from above, ridicule and disdain lifting from the corners of his mouth. Zhu Yuan, since you want death so badly, you can only blame yourself in the underworld. Under countless gazes of disbelief, Zhu Yuan continued his advance with a cold look on his face. A fist covered in golden scales powerfully slammed into the descending giant scarlet gravel fist with the strongest power he could muster. The entire white jade plaza seemed to violently tremble at this moment. The entire world seemed to fall silent for an instant when Zhu Yuan's golden scale-covered fist collided with the giant scarlet gravel fist. Next, everyone watched as a berserk Genesis Chi shockwave frantically unfurled. The tiles on the giant white jade plaza were vaporized to dust. Such a clash made even several Alpha Origin experts shiver inside. If they were the ones on the battlefield, they would likely be incapable of withstanding such a crazy shockwave. Everyone's eyes were tightly glued to the epicenter of the shockwave. Zhu Yuan is definitely dead. The crowd secretly shook their heads inside. Zhu Yuan's foolish actions were undoubtedly no difference from plunging to one's death in their eyes. After all, the attack Wu Huang had used was a Heaven Genesis technique. Even Zhu Yuan's Genesis rune boundary had been unable to stop it, let alone taking it directly with his body. Wu Huang stood on his Genesis Chi, eyes ice cold as a savage smile slowly lifted from the corners of his lips. Zhu Yuan, have you finally given up? At this moment, an extremely faint sound rang out. Wu Huang suddenly cast his gaze downwards as his eyes focused, before a look of disbelief flooded his face. He had just seen a faint crack appear on the giant scarlet gravel fist. At this time, even with his mental fortitude, Wu Huang involuntarily cried out, "How is this possible? Nothing is impossible." A voice rang out from under the giant scarlet gravel fist. Dazzling golden light suddenly erupted, a sliver of purple seemingly present within it. Boom! Rays of light, that seemed to contain tremendous power blossomed as cracks rapidly emerged on the giant scarlet gravel fist. In the end, it exploded with a loud boom. The giant fist transformed into countless specks of scarlet light that danced in the sky. Everyone was dumbstruck. Even Zhao Pan's mouth hung slightly open, his face filled with shock. Mu Wuji blinked in disbelief as he mumbled, "How did the kid do it?" Wu Huang's previous offensive could not have been any more powerful. According to Mu Wuji's estimates, even a 3-layer Alpha Origin expert would not dare to face the attack head-on, leaving no option but to withdraw. And yet, the Heaven Gate stage Zhu Yuan had somehow blasted it apart in the most simple and barbaric of manners. Zhu Yuan's figure emerged from the specks of light that danced and filled the sky, still in a punching posture, while golden scales flickered on his fist. At closer inspection, one would discover a faint trace of purple on the golden scales, causing them to give off a purplish gold luster. Is this the third level of the magical python scales, the purplish gold scales? Zhu Yuan's gaze was lowered, looking at the hint of purplish gold on the scales. But the purple is too thin. It seems that it's still not the true purplish gold scales. Zhu Yuan shook his head. Even so, he could already feel the overwhelming power brought by the faintly purplish gold magical python scales. In his feat of destroying the giant scarlet gravel fist with a single punch, the Saint Rune may have played the main cast, but the contribution from the magical python scales could not be ignored either. Zhu Yuan raised his head, his icy gaze looking towards the shocked Wu Huang. Without wasting any time, the former slammed his foot into the ground. The ground cracked. Zhu Yuan's figure was launched forward, appearing behind Wu Huang in a flash. 5 fingers tightly clenched into a fist as a punch blasted through the air. Wu Huang's returned to his senses, and hurriedly spat out a ball of scarlet-red Genesis Chi that rapidly turned into a red shield in front of his body. Ancient patterns flickered in Zhu Yuan's pupils, immediately finding several light dots on the Genesis Chi shield. Zhu Yuan was expressionless, as his fist punched into one of the light dots. Berserk power swept forth, instantly shattering Wu Huang's Genesis Chi defenses. Wu Huang's expression changed, unable to comprehend why Zhu Yuan had suddenly become so formidable. Even so, the former's senses told him that Zhu Yuan's strength had still not risen to the point where he could overwhelm Wu Huang. But why was Zhu Yuan able to so cleanly and easily destroy his defenses? Wu Huang's figure quickly retreated in a rather miserable manner. Zhu Yuan chased like a shadow, crazed attacks sweeping towards his opponent. No matter what kind of defenses Wu Huang put it, they were all ultimately destroyed in the most efficient of manners. Blasted, why is this happening? How can he so easily shatter all my defenses? Wu Huang's eyes had turned red, filled with both alarm and anger. Zhu Yuan paid no attention to Wu Huang, appearing behind him again in a flash as fists surrounded by vigorous Genesis Chi viciously attacked. Wu Huang had no time to avoid this time, Genesis Chi once again forming a scarlet-red battle armor on his body. However, Zhu Yuan seemed to not even see the armor, fists quick as lightning as they simultaneously struck dozens of spots on the armor. Every hit landed on the weakest areas of the Genesis Chi battle armor. As such, it was blown apart in practically an instant. Wu Huang vomited a mouthful of fresh blood, his figure shooting straight downwards into the ground, creating a deep pit in the white jade floor. Zhu Yuan's eyes were as cold as the edge of a blade. Without any hesitation, his figure swiftly shot downwards, his knees slamming into Wu Huang's body as a rain of punches descended with a loud yell. Every punch struck flesh, cracking open the ground below a little more with each hit. Wu Huang was having a really miserable time, blood wildly spouting from his mouth. Both the inside and outside of the Saint Remains domain was completely silent as they watched Zhu Yuan pummel Wu Huang. None of them understood why Zhu Yuan had suddenly become so overwhelming all of a sudden, as if he had taken some kind of battle drug. It seemed that any attack of Wu Huang's was merely equivalent to air in Zhu Yuan's eyes. Zhao Pan's expression was so stormy that it nearly about to rain. Mu Wuji could not help, but awkwardly scratched his head. He felt as if Zhu Yuan had transformed into a completely different person, so fierce that it was a little unreasonable. Boom. On the White Jade Plaza, Zhu Yuan's fists suddenly paused from their onslaught as a burst of berserk Genesis Chi frantically erupted from Wu Huang's body, catapulting the former away. Zhu Yuan's feet slid on the ground before he quickly steadied his body, eyes now slightly narrowed as he looked to his front. There was a huge hole there. Wu Huang's blooded body lay within it, a sight that was sorry to the extreme. Zhu Yuan panted as he clenched his fists. The scales tinged with a slight trace of purplish gold had broken in many places. Blood also dripped from them, raw flesh visible in some areas where even bone could be seen. However, Zhu Yuan ignored his wounds, his eyes akin to a sharp blade as he stared at Wu Huang's figure in the hole. The latter was a miserable sight, clearly pretty badly hurt by Zhu Yuan's earlier barrage. However, he was frowning slightly because every time he tried to deal a fatal blow, he could faintly feel a force in Wu Huang's body neutralizing any strike that was enough to kill. This guy. As Zhu Yuan stared, Wu Huang's bloody body shakily stood up from the hole. Wu Huang's eyes were a sea of blood red, filled with indescribable fury and savageness. Never in his wildest dreams would he have ever imagined that he would be beaten into such a pathetic state by that crippled dragon. For the prideful and arrogant Wu Huang, this was even harder to accept than dying. Wu Huang stared at Zhu Yuan. In the end, he lifted his head to the sky and laughed loudly, a laugh thick with murder. Zhu Yuan, I truly never expected that there will come a day when I, Wu Huang, would fall into such a pathetic and miserable state because of you. However, even so, you still cannot kill me. Mockery rose from the corners of his lips as he stared at Zhu Yuan and asked, do you know why? The savagery in his eyes grew more and more violent, before he suddenly ripped his clothes apart, revealing his naked body. One would see the faint silhouette of a dragon coiling on the surface of his skin. Zhu Yuan's pupils abruptly tightened, staring hard at the dragon silhouette in Wu Huang's flesh. A heart-rending pain suddenly tore through him the instant he saw it. An intense pain that had flooded out from the deepest part of his memory. Back then, he had lain on that ice-cold altar while King Wu stole his sacred dragon blessing and poured it into Great Wu's python and sparrow. The intense pain he felt at that moment so many years ago was the same one he felt now. Blood surged up in Zhu Yuan's eyes bit by bit. Can you feel it? Wu Huang laughed sincerely. The blood-red dot between his brows seemed to grow increasingly redder at this moment as a low dragon roar echoed from within his body. Ha 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 ha. That's right. This is the sacred dragon blessing that had been stripped from your body back then. With it protecting me, how can you possibly kill me? Crisp cracking sounds emanated from Zhu Yuan's fist, his fingernails digging deep into his flesh. His face twitched faintly as violent savagery flooded his eyes. So what if you're angry? Wu Huang released a chilling chuckle, cocking his head as he continued to stare at Zhu Yuan. It seems that you've never experienced the sacred dragon blessing before, right? Since that it's so, I'll let you have a good feel today. Zhu Yuan, how do you feel about dying by the sacred dragon blessing that originally belonged to you? Ha ha, you pitiful worm. All of your efforts will turn to foam today. Wu Huang laughed madly. In the next instant, his expression twisted into incomparable maliciousness and savagery as a dark and chilling voice abruptly sounded. Dragon blessing, dragon transformation. While it continued to echo, the dragon silhouette on Wu Huang's skin faintly trembled, before flooding into his flesh and blood. Wu Huang's body immediately began to swell. Dragon scales emerged on the surface of his body, while his hands also started showing signs of draconification, sharp fingernails flickering with icy light that made one's heart thud a little harder. Of course, the most terrifying transformation of all was the steadily strengthening Genesis Chi that had erupted from Wu Huang's body. Even the surrounding floor began to crumble inch by inch due to the powerful Genesis Chi pressure. Every person both in and outside of the Saint Remains was speechless for a time as they looked at the horrifying thing Wu Huang had become. No one had expected such a degree of abnormality from Wu Huang. To think that he still had such an astonishing trump card up his sleeve after such an intense battle. He truly is unfathomable. Wu Huang is number one amongst the younger generation of the Kangman continent. These were the only evaluations the crowd could give as they shook their heads. Mu Wuji also let out a bitter laugh when he saw this. Who could have predicted such an intense fight between two of the younger generation? However, in the face of Wu Huang's endless arsenal of trump cards, even he could not help but sigh in admiration. This guy was truly a genius blessed by the heavens. To have come this far, Zhu Yuan is already very outstanding. Mu Wuji secretly said in his heart. Zhao Pan breathed a sigh of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from his shoulders. His eyes flickered in thought as he stared at Wu Huang's figure, and secretly mumbled to himself, Wu Huang is indeed a good seedling. No wonder even Palace Master said that he possesses the will of the heavens, and must be brought into Sacred Palace. It should be over this time, right? As Zhao Pan spoke, even he did not realize that he was no longer as certain as he had been in the beginning. He was now clearly afraid due to Zhu Yuan, scared that he would suddenly pull something out of the bag again, causing the situation to fall into uncertainty once again. This video will end here.